Hi everyone! Welcome back to the newest episode of Cyclonic Rift, where we talk about Commander and stuff. My name is Jon. I'm finally doing one of these intro things, and I think Matt still does them better. What are we talking about this week, Nachu?
So today, for episode 4, the title of it is Breakfast at Sram's. So this is one of my favorite, one of the decks that I've loved and hated the most throughout its time, as it's sort of evolved as much as a mono white deck can. It's also come very close to being on the chopping block, but you've walked me away from swinging down.
Because it's your oldest deck.
It is my oldest deck right now, which is not saying much because I built it when Sram came out in Kaladesh.
So that's
2016, 2017.
Yeah, that's yeah. It was around. It was like around. It was like around the turn of 2017. 2018.
So I'm going to go through it a bit today to talk about, as we sort of did with Shui Yun, that a bit of a history of it, and then just get right into the fact that what I like about this deck, and like the idea of the deck, as per the name, is Cheerios cereal, which is the idea of a deck where you play very low cost or zero cost artifacts for card draw in many cases.
Yeah.
So, and just to be clear, for Sram Senior Artificer, he is 1 and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature Dwarf Advisor.
Yeah.
And whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. Now, one of those ones we don't care about. There are no cars in this video. This is not paid for in sponsorship by Ford. This is talking about really.
So we're not Michael Bay. This is not a Michael Bay product placement transfer.
Bumblebee is not involved.
Okay, but also the flavor text, please.
Oh, as this conflict grows, it gets harder to protect the city from breaking down. How much longer can we keep this machinery balanced? Or, I also sometimes read that in Torbjorn's voice, because to me he's like Torbjorn from Overwatch. Anyways, breaking down from an agenda perspective, I'm going to be talking about history, the cards in the deck that fall into different categories, those being the Cheerio effects themselves, the value and tax effects, because we are playing mono white after all, and we're playing a bit of a Voltron strategy, as will become evident.
Yep.
The different types of artifacts, the categories called sword or axe.
How very dwarfish of you.
Yeah, and then next one would be the guests have arrived, which is a very short breakdown of some of the cards of value creatures to suit up.
Yep. His friends.
And then 1 or 2 strengths and weaknesses, and then an example of a hand to keep in this deck, because I feel like in this deck where you're really reliant upon the commander, similar to other decks that I have like Selvala, you need to evaluate when you draw.
Yeah, which I think like the distinguishment is that your commander is very much an enabler of your entire strategy.
Oh yeah, it would suck otherwise.
So you're looking at a starting hand of 8 almost, because picture Sram in your starting hand, so it's like your starting hand has to reflect your casting of Sram and using his ability.
Yeah.
And I just think, okay, so I noticed that we've done this a couple times now. I just realized I was a history major. You were a classics major.
Yep.
Of course, we start with the history every time.
It's a preamble, John.
It's our abstract for the piece.
Yeah.
Okay, so Cheerios is where we start.
Yeah. So this category, like the first category, Cheerio effects, is like really representative by a couple cards, but the one that I love drawing attention to, because I think it's also good in certain decks that are not just artifact heavy, but are color heavy. It's Paradise Mantle. It's a 0 cost artifact equipment. This is an uncommon from, I believe, the original Modern Masters set. This is one of the printings, at least. It has equipped creature has tap. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Equip for 1 colorless. In the flavor text, it contains the wisdom of generations of our people. We permit only a chosen few to don the raiment, said Imran Viridian Elder.
So obviously must be OG Mirrodin here.
Yeah.
Back when Glissa was a good girl.
Yeah, so the card itself really does, and a lot of the cards that do this, and not to name all of them, but I'm thinking of other ones that cost 0 or 1. The other iconic one really is Skullclamp, which serves 2 purposes across the categories.
Yeah.
I
imagine all of our listeners know what Skullclamp is.
Skullclamp costs 1 generic mana. equipped creature gets +1/-1, and when equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards, equip for 1. Which, all of these really have also tacked onto them when SRAM's in the field, draw a card.
Yeah.
Draw a card, draw a card, draw a card, which is the Cheerio category.
Which is interesting because that's a very strong parallel to Shuyan, when we talked about Shuyan, in that I'm casting a cantrip, a spell cantrip, but it also has the text, gives Shuyan +1/+1.
Yeah.
Right? So in this case, SRAM is more about draw a card. All his enablers are draw a card.
Yep. Which, there's a couple other ones that I really like.
Which turns Paradise Mantle from kind of niche into like the staple of SRAM, because you're paying no mana and you're drawing a card.
Yep. Which
is very efficient. Which
we'll come back to these sorts of cards later on in the episode, where in your opening hand there are games where I've kept hands with 2 lands, bunch of things that cost 1 or 0, and that's it. Those equipments are some of them are very powerful. Some of them, though, because you look at it on its own, it's okay. There are other with 0 cost ones that are just crap.
Yeah.
Like, I won't even name them. They don't even need to be named. That cost 0, they bump a creature up a little bit by toughness, and that's it. Which I think shows that it's balancing between the fact that, yes, most of these should have that other little line of text that says, when SRAM's out, you draw a card. But you also sort of have to look at this category and say, okay, if he's not out, what else is it doing?
Yeah.
What else is it doing for the creatures that are out already that we'll talk about, and how is it helping you to win? Which, as much as card advantage and card draw is a way to help you get there, the second part is combat.
Yeah, like you need, at a certain point, you need power.
Yeah, because this is nothing for Voltron.
No. But I guess it's good in white, in SRAM in particular, it's like noteworthy because this is ramping you.
Yep, it's ramping onto those, because there are some creatures that will never attack. Moving on already, really, because there's not much else I don't think to say about Cheerios, because really there are other versions of that type of deck. One recently that you've built it, and I've always been curious to see it outside of a mono white context, is the new Joyra.
Yeah,
which is 2 in a red-blue legendary creature. Whenever you cast an artifact spell,
historic spell, but people have gone the artifact route,
and you draw a card. So we've seen you do it where it pushes you, that because the color combination as well, to Storm-ish, combo-ish. The fact that Cheerios and mono white, there's only so much room I think you can go outside of.
And the fact that there's a bunch of equipment, like there's a bunch of, where Joyra is like artifacts, there is like also a bunch of equipment for SRAM's ability that kind of makes the idea of a little dwarf getting souped up in power armor viable.
Yeah, there's also there are auras in the deck as well that somewhat fall into almost a Cheerio category. Flickering Ward is one that comes to mind. 1 white aura, when it enters the battlefield, enchanted creature gains protection from the color of your choice till end of turn,
which is really good.
Pay 1 white, return Flickering Ward to your hand, which the deck list will be on Tapped Out for those curious. I think this is also the deck list I have from that category's perspective is relatively generic, from the perspective that it's, do they cost little to nothing? Do they have a little bit of value when they're in the deck? I've struggled with keeping it a bit trimmed, because there are some that you just don't, the ones that I won't name because they don't need to be named, don't make the cut, because there's so many other value artifacts and ways that you need to actually support SRAM, maximize his capabilities, because he is mono white at the end of the day, which is a segue into the next category, which is supporting and maximizing the strategy. Because
I guess the thing is, and I've seen you when you've played it, is that you have a bunch of, sometimes you have a board state where SRAM is souped up and he's scary, but sometimes it's like, you just have like a bunch of little artifact equipment here, and so, but you don't necessarily have like a big equipment that's going to punish a player.
Yep.
So then how do you use this board state of little Paradise Mantles to suddenly go from one turn to the next, from not a threat to holy crap?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because the next card that falls in, the first in this category, which I think this needs to find more play, and it's one of those cards that I think should be picked up because it's relatively cheap right now, is Inspiring Statuary. 3 generic mana for an artifact. Non-artifact spells you cast have improvise. So there's reminder text on this because this is Improvise is somewhat of a more recent mechanic in this case.
Also from Kaladesh.
Yes, your artifacts can help cast those spells. Each artifact you tap after you've done activating mana abilities pays for 1 generic.
Yeah.
So the way that I've put it there, and I love this, is that the interaction with equipment with this is that equipments don't care when they're equipped to a creature if they become tapped.
Or even before they're equipped to a
There's
creature.
no-
I don't think they ever care about
No,
it.
there's never... The only one... no, because the ones that only ever care about tapping and untapping, it's when they give it to the creature. So
Yeah. Like Paradise Mantle.
Yeah. So in this case, what I love doing with this, and you've seen it, is that in order to maximize, and it's really more supporting in this case, what does white do well? Sometimes it does really large, scary creatures. And the one that is iconic, was printed in Iconic Masters, is Avacyn Angel of Hope.
Which gives all of your permanents indestructible.
Though it is 8 mana, 5 white.
But the fact that I've seen you where you've dumped artifacts onto the field.
Yeah.
So you can bring out Avacyn as early as turn 4 or turn 5.
And while you're bringing her out,
You also have a bunch of artifacts.
and you're drawing from Sram if he's out, if they're equipment. So, Inspiring Statuary, I think this is one of these cards that when we make another episode talking about like pet cards, this is one I love putting into decks that don't necessarily run mana rocks, because it itself, in the way it itself taps.
It also, you can read Inspiring Statuary as if you run no other artifacts, tap it, add 1.
Yep.
Add 1 generic to your mana pool.
The other way that I really use this, and I didn't really talk about, I think I've mentioned a couple in the other episode lightly, is that SRAM used to have 2 themes. One of them was, in this category, maximizing Voltron and equipments. The sub-theme, though, which took over a little bit, and I've cut it out as a little bit more, is tokens. White Sun Zenith in this, and there's a couple other big token generators.
Increasing Devotion is the other one that makes a bunch of...
Wipes the board, and... no, sorry.
That's the one that makes all the humans?
Yes, sorry, yeah. I'm thinking of the board wipe that destroys all creatures, and if X is a certain amount, you make tokens.
So, which is really good in this, because
Yep.
you can dump a bunch of mana into making a bunch of tokens,
Yep.
and then you have 1 or 2 artifacts on the field, and then you equip a little token. It's like, then you kill the token. Oh, fine, I'll put up my equipment somewhere else. And it's like, okay, I see that they're just like the Soviet army in World War II passing rifles along, you know?
Yeah, it's inspiring. It's inspiring, because it adds a bit more flexibility to the games where I get to the point where, because there are effects that support white ramp.
Yeah.
But if I don't hit a land tax, I'm going to name them, I apologize. If I don't hit a Weathered Wayfarer, these effects that, or sort of the Animus, which is a big one in this deck, which we'll talk about, that you rely on those few effects for ramp, this can really help. Obviously, there is like those situations where you have only artifact spells in your hand, and you're strapped for cash, strapped for resources, strapped for mana. It's not going to be as good. But there are so many times where I've played this, and it's an enabler through its support. Another card that really falls in this category, and there's a few in white, but this is one of the few that I really love because it takes a very cheap card, and dependent if you meet its parameters, it turns it into something that costs a few more bucks.
Yeah. Yeah, like $10 or so. It goes from 15 cents to $10 or whatever.
And that card is a Dispatch. 1 white, instant, tap target creature. Metalcraft. If you control 3 or more artifacts, exile that creature. So it becomes a one-sided, really, without the typical benefit, Swords to Plowshares or Path to Exile.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are the few times where I've had to be desperate and use the tap target creature effect.
But it goes from getting rid of a threat permanently to probably getting rid of it for a turn.
Oh, but the amount of times as well that obviously the exile is what you want for Metalcraft, but there are the few times where one person has like a token generator out each turn. They continually make 1 creature of the 1 color that SRAM doesn't have the protection from, and I can't get through. So I'm swinging this massive this massive Gundam dwarf.
Yeah.
continually getting, like, smacking it into a 1/1 for chump blocks. And it's things like this, so that also it does two things. It enables combat, because that's really what the deck is focusing on, and there's no combo into it otherwise. But it also deals with problematic things.
Yeah, and I think in Voltron, because we talked about this before in Shuyan, Voltron like needs these cards that simultaneously support the strategy of the commander and also eliminate obstacles, which I guess in a turn is kind of supporting a Voltron strategy, but it's great when you have the choice. Like, cards with choice are particularly powerful.
Yep, and the benefit it has scales up.
Yeah,
scales up as if the deck is doing what it should. Obviously, in the game, if your deck isn't doing what it should be doing, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah.
The next one is representative of a couple cards that we see, like a category of cards that we see play, where sort of these white reversal cards, where there's a couple of ones in black as well, but you get board wiped. If things get exiled, not much you can do. But someone Damnations, someone
Wrath of God,
Austere Command, whatever it is, these things that come out and just reset a certain card type on the board state, and in this case, artifacts, or creatures. How do you recover in a very quick way? Where in this, for some of these cards, it does benefit your opponents, but really you need to do it in order to recover. Otherwise, you will not come back. So the card in this case is called Second Sunrise. It's one colorless and 2 white. Instant. Each player returns to play all artifact, creature, enchantment, and land cards that were put into his or her graveyard from play this turn. Flavor text. The black tunnel sometimes leads back to light.
It's the bright tunnel.
The bright tunnel. You know what? Sun's involved.
Okay.
Praise the sun.
Praise the sun.
So this is also from OG Darksteel.
Mirrodin.
Well, you know what I mean. Like the OG Mirrodin set.
Yeah. A couple of our cards are from OG Mirrodin.
It's like $1 or $2. Or a dollar or $2 if you're not. This is one of those cards where this has saved me in a game. Because so I'm thinking of those board wipes that are really, they're supposed to be affecting everyone on the same level, but because someone is not playing artifacts, they'll destroy all artifacts.
Vandal Blast.
Yeah.
Vandal Blast, there's been on multiple occasions where we've played this deck, and there's like 2 steps I need to perform. 1, get Vandal Blast. 2, hope to Christ that Vandal Blast sticks.
Yep. Because otherwise I'm...
By sticks, I mean, I cast it, you don't have one of these effects in your hands, and I've wiped out 5 equipments that were breathing down my neck.
Yeah, and I think this... So it's obvious what this does. It's a support card for recovering in a mono-white deck. Hilariously, they've also used it to be political, because if someone will just be knocked out of the game, you make a deal. You say, hey, you've lost everything.
Yeah.
But how about the sun rises again for you, my friend?
The night is always darkest before the dawn. Insert other cliche.
Insert Batman there. So
these are cards that support or maximize your pre-existing strategy, which is based on this Cheerios effect with cards like Paradise Mantle to enable Sram to swing for the fences.
There are. So I recommend what I'm going to try to do is go into the tapped out list and break the cards down by custom categories to show these, because these are obviously not all of them, but they're representative of generating some value that supports, removing things that stop Sram from going swing, swing, bang, bang, and recovering from potentially back-breaking, Bane-breaking, Dark Knight reference.
Okay. Yeah.
Batman reference.
I was slow there.
Yeah. You're always a bit slow.
Yeah, okay.
So the next category, speaking of slowing things down, is value and tax effects.
Oh, tax effects. If there's one thing I hate more, but it's necessary in white.
It's necessary, and
particularly mono white.
I feel like we'll have to revisit this category across, maybe not format-wise, but with our own opinions on it, because I find myself more and more decks, and sometimes at your own advice, is that you have to commit to doing this because the rest of the deck's theme or win con is not good enough. White is very good at these effects.
Yeah.
There's so many redundancies and variations that...
Like, you have to take advantage of it, and the one that we have pulled up here is probably the most iconic of them all, the most played of them all, the most printed, which is Blind Obedience.
Yeah.
1 and a white, artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. It also has Extort, which is when you cast a spell, you may pay white or black. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain that much life, and we can't underestimate the annoyance that is Extort.
Can you also not underestimate the flavor text?
Oh, sorry. By the time your knees have worn through your robe, you may have begun to learn your place. Like, shots fired. This guy's a baller.
This has been reprinted a number of times, but it's also, from a flavor perspective, it is so Orzhov. And it just... Again, this also gets into the wider discussion about whether or not this is a reminder rules text. It has 2 colors in it. Whether or not this has a place.
Yeah.
That gets into another conversation.
That is the woes of Commander players and color identity.
Screw those people, because mono white, we have it rough. As John would say, it's hard out here.
It is hard out here for poor Sram.
So there's a number of other ones. Authority of the Consuls is another one. Costs 1 white, slows things down, things enters tapped. That the one sound I love the most is turn 2 this comes out, and you just hear a collective, oh. Which, you know what, like, I think it's balancing as well that I get that tax effects suck. Death and Taxes is a strategy that is used in other formats.
Yeah.
And taxes have a role to play in a multiplayer game.
Yeah.
Because I think otherwise there are certain things that there are certain decks that just don't do as well if they don't have that time. Not necessarily saying just control, but this deck is a very good example that creatures entering tapped, the backswing's going to be great for Sram.
Well, and I've been in situations before playing against you with this where these type of effects where my creatures enter tapped, my stuff enters tapped, and you're applying commander damage pressure, and some of my blockers have gotten removed or what have you. It means like I can't mount a defense anymore because whatever I put enters tapped and you still get a swing at me.
Yeah, it goes back to also what we were talking about, which on that exact note, that, as you said, commander damage pressure early on, Sram may not be suited up, but if I hit you for 2 now, that really might matter, because otherwise I might 2-shot you later on.
Yeah, it builds up.
The incidental commander damage that will matter later on.
Because you never know when you get into those late game situations where you could have commander damage that now you're maybe past getting 10 or so. You don't know what I don't know what you have in your hand. I don't know what your ability is to suddenly make SRAM super swole in a turn, which makes these effects difficult. And I think like the other effect about this, which is really good, is, at least I find with Shu Yun, is that punishing people, when people try to punish you for swinging, like bringing down a big hasty creature, Blind Obedience shuts down people for punishing you. Yeah. Which is great.
And there are other ones in the deck, and I do... These are the cards that you'll look at and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, again, the other one I mentioned, Authority of the Consuls. It also just... Some of them have these sort of not double tax, but there's the tax effect plus something else that can make a difference. Authority of the Consuls is a good example where you're gaining that little bit of life. There is life gain in this deck, like through a lot of the equipment, but...
Well, because you don't run a whole lot of creatures. You don't necessarily run a whole lot of blockers. Gaining back life can give you an extra turn or 2. Yeah. Which, as we know as Voltron players, a turn or 2 is sometimes enough. That's enough. That's all you need.
Yeah, and speaking of life and life lost, this next card is still in the same category of... But this is something that I see as being potentially game-winning. Right. Is Luminarch Ascension. It's 1 and a white enchantment. The beginning of each opponent's end step. If you did not lose life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Luminarch Ascension. Yeah. Then, pay 1 and a white, create a 4/4 flying angel creature token, activate this ability only if Luminarch Ascension has 4 or more quest counters on it. So, thankfully we don't play 6-man games. Yeah. This, in a 4-player game, can very quickly get online. Will, at the same time, can draw you some hate very quickly. Because we've seen this in this deck and other decks get out of hand.
it's very. I wish there was like a way of categorizing these cards, but I think when people evaluate them, they either go, "Oh, this is trash because it's going to get removed right away, so why play it?" But there's also those instances where people can't get rid of it,
Yep.
and it punishes you for not having the type of removal that you need, and then it can carry the game for you.
That's why if I find myself in a situation where, and this is really going to actually evaluating not the board state, but like the table. This is not really, it's not really metagaming. It's really just threat assessing. Okay, what color combinations am I up against? If there's a mono black player, I'm killing them last because they cannot deal with these enchantments.
Yeah.
Because they're not running Scar from Existence.
Yeah.
They're not running these things that.
Which is like, I don't know why, guys. Like, unless you're in green or white or something, like, you gotta run Scour from Existence because, like, what are you gonna do?
As someone who would be the target of those Scours many times, like, again, yeah, cost 7 mana. Late game, you're in top deck mode, and there's literally one thing that you can't get rid of.
Yeah.
I know it's very situational sometimes, and that, hexproof and whatever exists, but if I keep this out as this Ram player, and I get this online, it's giving me bodies to equip my things to.
Yep.
Which is really sometimes the detriment of the downside of the deck is that the board wipes, spot removal have continued to happen. SRAM costs 12 mana.
Yeah.
And I have all these shiny, sharp things lying around, and they'll be generating me so much value, but I can't have a body. Here's my body.
Yeah. Speaking of Scour from Existence, it doesn't have a white mana in it, so that means with Improvising Statuary, it would actually be really good in here.
I suppose, yeah. seven generic mana.
You just tap seven shitty Cheerio equipments, and it's like, bam, exile a permanent.
This card is also a bit of a leftover from my my backup, my token days. But I think there's so much strength to it, and again, it's been reprinted, thankfully, but it's been one of those cards that was creeping up in price a little bit because it just gets out of hand. Because we've seen this come out turn 2.
Here in the Great White North, it's now a third of what its price was, I think.
Which, as it should be, because as a mono white player, everyone should have access.
Well, it's also like, what is this played in? Commander.
It's Commander. Yeah.
So, and then the last one, and I think this is perhaps.
This is a very iconic.
I almost feel like we could have a full length conversation about the creepy power, the creepy both literally and metaphorically of Shadows of Innistrad and Eldritch Moon, and some of these cards that are like pretty defined or pretty iconic now, or pretty essential to certain commander decks. And Sigarda's Aid. Like, I sometimes forget, like, oh yeah, this was printed in like a new set. This seems like a card that should have been printed 10 years ago because it does so many things.
Okay, let's just break it down first. Sigarda's Aid, 1 white, enchantment.
Can't be underestimated how powerful it is that it's just 1 white.
A rare from Eldritch Moon. You may cast aura and equipment spells as though they had flash, i.e. as an instant.
Yep.
Whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach it to target creature you control. The Order of St. Traft found new strength with her Sigarda's support. And the art is I don't think they printed it on it, but I like a playmat of this.
Yeah.
Because it's painted and the art will be up, or the card will be on the screen right now. Like, I see it as almost like a tapestry, like a medieval sort of. Sigarda is descending from the heavens and giving what almost looks like Mjolnir to a fallen soldier, and they're all. It's just. Sorry, I'm also like Sigarda is very near and dear to my Selesnyan heart.
Well, she's Sigurd.
But
what this does, okay, so like what it does, like if you translate what it does,
line by line,
it gives what you care about instant speed, which is like, sure, great, that's awesome. Suddenly now I can do things whenever I want. But then the second one,
it's the second paragraph that.
So when you cast an instant, or whenever it enters the battlefield,
an
equipment, sorry, you're casting the equipment at instant speed, you may attach it to a target creature, which means you're subverting equipment costs, which mean you're subverting mana costs, and we know the power that is one of the most backbreaking things that always gets talked about in EDH circles is that when you're doing something that lets you ignore or subvert the cost of something, you're probably doing something really powerful. And Cigar 8 also does this for a white, and the flavor text invokes two of our best boys from Innistrad, that is Sigurd and the Geist. They are cool boys.
So we'll talk about opening hands quickly at the end, but this thing, like, you know the God hand?
Yeah.
Like,
you want this. 2
lands, Cheerio effect, Sigarda's Aid, maybe another creature, and then, because really what you want is turn 1, Sigarda's Aid, turn 2, Sram. You can maybe get away with a Cheerio effect after that, because then it equips for free. Turn 3, the best is you go to combat and you wait. Or you scare people and you don't hit them with as much as you can, and then you do the thing where on the end step when it comes back around the table, flash, draw 3 cards, equip, and this thing, the way that I put it there is that it insulates the deck against one of the weaknesses of the strategy and the color, which equipments usually come out in your turn. Equip as a sorcery speed.
And sometimes equipment costs are a lot, and you're not in a color that sometimes always has a lot of ramp.
The thing that this thing does not get around still, obviously, is Shroud, because typically when you hear the word attach, it usually is not always followed up by attach it to target creature.
Yes.
Not instead of you may attach it to a creature you control. So this thing does not get around you've seen it, the amount of times where Lightning Greaves is out. And I just can't. Someone's killed my other creature, so Sram is Shroudy, and just keeps getting in for damage 2 at a time, but I can't get any other swords on him. So this thing, there's a couple other effects like this in the deck, but Sigarda's 8 I think stands out on its own, that, as you said, it's a whole package. Low cost, game strategy changing, as in, like, it really makes you think a little bit more as a mono white player doing Voltron, where, okay, when am I actually going to be doing this?
You no longer have to do things on your turn.
Also, most importantly, as I mentioned up before, Flickering Ward in this, because it's auras as well. The amount of times where, during a round the table sort of thing, I'll leave up 6 mana, and by the time it comes back to me, I will have used all that 6 mana to bounce the ward, recast again, draw a card, bounce and it's just... I don't know, this is one of my favorite cards. I think this is one of the few foils I have in the deck, because this one it's perfect for me.
It does.
And on the next category then, onto the next category. So that was value and tax effects, because really they sort of go hand in hand with the first category of supporting and maximizing, and that the value that you generate from the things that aren't your equipments and creatures have to propel the dwarf towards victory.
And so now we need the stuff that makes him scary.
Yeah, so I call this category Sword or Axe, which is a reference to The Hobbit. When they ask Bilbo, do you want a sword or axe? And he doesn't know. Anyways.
That's great.
So, I'm not going to go through all of them here. I'm going to let our editor put them onto the screen.
Which dwarf is Sram? Is he Biffer, Bofer, Bumber?
I don't know. Don't ask me such questions.
Maybe he's Balin or Dwalin? He's Dwalin. No, I don't know.
No, he's Torbjorn.
Well, no, we'll ask the listeners, man. Which Hobbit dwarf, which guy from the Erebor is our Srammy boy?
Is he dopey?
No, that's somewhat. Oh.
Okay, so moving on. This category, it's really just talking about the equipments that I love about this deck. There are some that I obviously don't talk about because they're not as iconic or backbreaking against other opponents. But there is the cycle, which I'll ask our editor to put them on the screen. I won't name them all. Sword of blank and blank.
Yeah.
So this is the cycle that was originally printed back. I believe a lot of them were printed back in original Mirrodin. Some of them were printed back then. Fire and Ice,
I think
Light and
so.
Shadow.
Yeah.
And then there were some that were printed in Mirrodin Besieged, and they've been some of them have been reprinted.
Which is the new Phyrexia, which is Mirrodin 2.0.
Yeah, and a lot of them have also been reprinted in supplementary products like the Modern Masters, and I believe like the Modern Event deck, which it was before my time. Anyways, these things all have similar effects, and I don't think I need to read them all out, because those who know about these, and those who know hate or love these. So the best example, and this one really...
I think this is the best one.
This has... Okay, so it depends on the situation, I think.
Okay.
This, though, is the Sword of Feast and Famine. They all have the same casting cost and equip cost, but different effects. So 3 to cast, 3 generic mana, artifact equipment, non-legendary, which is important. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from black and from green. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card, and you untap all lands you control. Equipped for 2. Like, so I think outside of the context of this deck, this generates the most stuff.
This is typically the most.
It oppresses and then raises you up a bit in that you can do all you want before combat and be rest assured if this thing gets in and hits and connects, you pretty much get not an extra turn. You get an extra.
You're doubling your resources.
Yeah, you're doing so much more, which we all know when it comes to, like you're saying, those cardinal things that you should be doing in Commander. In this case, you're almost in a way doubling your mana.
Yep.
And you're enabling more, and the upside to...
And you're protecting against some of the best spot removal in the format.
Yeah. So the other swords of the cycle, I have a lot of them in the deck, but not all of them. Fire and Ice is also a very good one. It gets around burn or blue, like Cyclonic Rift. It gets around certain things that are pesky. And the way that I wrote this is pesky other colors. Who needs them? Because really, we're mono white. Who cares, man? Because there are times where, like, so Sword of Light and Shadow, for example.
Because I guess you're saying this because sometimes the swords in tricolored, 4-colored decks, sometimes when you have protection from a color, it disadvantages you because you're wanting to do some sort of effect and you can't.
Because it has protection.
So you can't target it. But in mono white, it's like,
no, and
what effects do we have?
No, because I'm trying to think. So the only other ones the one that might affect it, so these are, maybe we can put these on the screen for this example. One of them is the one that I run, Sword of War and Peace.
Yeah.
So that's protection from red and white, which, same thing, +2/+2, protection from red and white, combat damage to a player. That player takes damage equal to the amount of cards in their hand. You gain life equal to the amount of cards in your hand.
Which is good.
Pro white. So that's one of the ones that I run. Really, the time that I can see it affecting it is I have some blink effects for evasion, but Eerie Interlude, I believe, is just, it's exile any number of creatures you control, doesn't target.
Yeah.
And it's good as well because obviously the downside is you have to re-equip, but it gets around that color because it doesn't really matter otherwise. I'm trying to think of other cases where I've seen it matter, and really it doesn't, because the value that they generate, I don't really, even if it did present an issue sometimes, don't care. Because the other one that I love, which I hope it's on the screen as well now, Sword of Body and Mind, which give him double strike protection. You want to give him double strike with other equipment, and then give him the Sword of Body and Mind, pro green, pro blue,
mills
10 each time it hits combat damage, and makes a 2/2 wolf. Some people go, oh, it's not that good. I love it because it's like, oh, I'm making more bodies to equip more things to, and then I'm going to maybe mill you out. Hilarious. So the sword cycle, obviously...
Yeah, it's getting those 2/2 stupid wolves.
Yeah, so some of the swords are quite pricey, but I think they're... As much as if I didn't have this deck, these swords would be like scattered across my other decks. This has sort of been where I've had to sort of put them in together in order to really do two things. One, going back to what I was saying before, I draw a card when I cast. Two, Voltron. Like that's really what this is one of my very few pure Voltron. I'm gonna give him some sharp things and he's gonna go to war.
Would you say that Sword of Feast and Famine, if our listeners had to get one of the Mirrodin swords, would you say Sword of Feast and Famine is the one to get? Outside
of playgroup specific things?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The second one I would say, also because of Game of Thrones, is a Sword of Fire and Ice.
Yeah.
Pro red, pro blue, +2/+2. When it hits, you shock something, any target, and you draw a card. Mainly because if you're playing it in a deck where you don't have card advantage, it does that a little bit. And you know what? Drawing cards never hurts, but you then have to sort of weigh it against, because this one I picked up first, because in our play group, little, thinking like Eternal Witnesses, or little tiny creatures.
Well, we know that when we sit down at the table, because we've talked about this before, it's almost guaranteed somebody's going to be playing black.
Yeah.
So that means you're pretty much almost going to be this is always gonna be relevant.
It also protects against one of the most annoying colors for removal.
Yeah.
Black, like the amount in our play group, Orzhov removal, pure black removal. It does a lot. So I would say this one, Fireeyes, I really dislike.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the cards that I really like. I got my copy from a friend of mine from years ago, and I've held on to it since because it's just. Anyways, moving on.
So these are
also my favorites.
Which is the Cauldre, which is the Cauldre Triad, the Triforce,
so I'm gonna
Zelda stuff.
I'm gonna read these out because these do a lot.
Yeah.
And I love them because the show notes I have for any Yu-Gi-Oh fans is Exodia. So, Helm of Cauldre, 3 generic mana, legendary artifact equipment. Creature has first strike, trample, and haste. Pay 1. If you control equipment called Helm of Cauldre, Sword of Cauldre, Shield of Cauldre, put a 4/4 colorless avatar legend creature named Cauldre into play and attach those equipment to it. Equip for 2. I'm going to keep going before I go back to this. Shield of Cauldre, 4 generic mana. Legendary artifact equipment. Equipment named Sword of Cauldre, Shield of Cauldre, and Helm of Cauldre are indestructible. Equipped creature is indestructible. Equip 4. Sword of Cauldre. 4 generic mana. Legendary artifact. Equipment. Equipped creature gets +5/+5. Whenever an equipped creature deals combat damage to a creature, remove that creature from the game. Equip 4. So, the synergy between the first two are evident. The shield protects everything else and protects the equipped creature. The Helm's ability, though, of once you've assembled Exodia, you've assembled these 3, paying 1 mana to make a 4/4, which is a repeatable effect, by the way. There's no hindrance to continue to do it, and I've done that. Someone kills the 4/4, make another one.
Because what are you getting when you pay the 1? You're getting a 4/4, but with
that circumvents.
But then it gets all the stuff, so you're basically
10 mana.
So you're making a 9/9 indestructible first strike, trample, haste, and then when it deals combat damage to a creature, you exile that creature, and then all of the equipment. So it's like the only thing that I can see that goes after this are like edict effects.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But the problem is that you just make another boy. And it's 1 mana to do it, so then you can spend like 5 mana and make a bunch of little guys.
So these 3 cards, they don't have flavor text, obviously, but they're flavorful to the point that it's amazing. I also don't think that token exists.
Oh, really?
Back in the day, because
the 4/4 colorless avatar legend.
This is from original Mirrodin set.
This is 5th Dawn.
The block there from each.
When Glissa was our girl.
You keep talking about her, man.
Yeah, because she went down a dark road.
So, we don't need to talk about redemption stories. Anyways, so this is something that it does. I don't need to even say it's evident what it does, really. If Sram is out, you're drawing a card whenever you cast each of these. The Helm is really important, that granting haste. And obviously there are better equipments that do this, instead of doing casting for 3, equipping for 2, but these are, if in the deck you'll see online there are tutors, very few white tutors that I run. I can't afford a couple of them because I can't justify it yet. These are your tutor effects if you can.
Yep.
These are the ones that you want to get out, and really when they do come out, these have won me the game many times because you can't. Like, I'm thinking you need mass
artifact removal,
exile. You need to remove them from the game.
Yeah, so you need your merciless eviction, exile all artifacts, and hope that you don't have some way of giving me the middle finger when I try to do that.
Oh, don't worry, I play Mana Tide.
Okay, yeah. So, Cauldre, really good. And I think this is perhaps this is your personal flavor choice, but there's also a lot of artifacts that, like, you can suit up SRAM kind of any way you want, but Cauldre is like an unstoppable force once it gets there.
Yep.
And you draw so many cards in white that I've seen it when you've just drawn 2 of these.
Yep.
Just from, because you're...
Yeah, screw tutors, I'm just going to draw my deck. So, last 2 cards I have in here, just because we're getting a bit long on time, is Umizawa's Jite. which is 2 colorless mana, legendary artifact equipment. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, put you 2 charge counters on the Jite. Remove a charge counter from Umezawa's Jite. Choose one. Creature gets +2/+2 till end of turn, or target creature gets -1/-1 till end of turn, or you gain 2 life. Equip for 2. This is back from Kamigawa. It's been reprinted a couple times. This is one of the ones that, the Planeswalker equipment? Like, this is something that does so much when you...
It's a toolbox on an equipment. I think these are better. This is better than the swords.
Yeah.
Just because it is so...
versatile.
Well,
think about it at the time. So this is something that...
It does so much, and it will keep generating more counters and will do more things.
The amount of times that someone, let's say Black Sun Zenith, someone taps out and has enough to kill everything on the board, or kill Sram because they're going to give him -X till end of turn. Jite pumps up.
Yep.
Someone plays a problematic indestructible creature. Jite kills.
Yep.
You're in late game and you need to gain life before the Jite gets blown up. You gain life.
Yeah, it's because it's the fact that you can remove... I bet if Umezawa's Jite was printed in 2018, it would have the beautiful, hateful claws, can only do this at sorcery speed.
Or once per turn.
Or something obnoxious. But back in the good old days of Kamigawa, remove a charge counter from Umezawa's Jite. : no stipulations.
Also, because of Sram, add it in there, draw a card,
Yeah.
cast this. Also, most importantly, if you give him double strike,
it does twice.
double the counters.
Yeah.
So this is one of the ones that Jite is well known. We don't need to dwell on its value as much. It finds a home in this deck because it should be in this sort of deck.
It compensates for so much.
So the next one, the last artifact in this section this is a more recent addition, to be honest, because I've seen the power of it, and it insulates further as well.
Yeah.
Is Nim Death Mantle. It's 2 colorless mana for an equipment. This is from New Phyrexia. This is from New Mirrodin.
Yep.
Equipped creature gets +2/+2, has Intimidate, which is important, and is a black zombie. So Sram's hungry for brains. Whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 4 generic mana. If you do, return that card to the battlefield and attach Nim Death Mantle to it. Equip for 4. I am never going to pay for the equip cost with this. I'm going to let Sram go to the graveyard because late game, after Sram has been cast 6 times, I'm happy to do this. And I get to draw a card. So this is something that I recently put in because this has a home in a lot of other Reanimator decks where it needs to be. This sort of brings things back that I need to not have die. Like when my Avacyn dies, she's coming back.
I guess the thing with this, right, is you have it equipped to Sram, and then when Sram dies, you can pay 4.
Yep.
And then you bring Sram back out of your graveyard.
Yep.
So...
And he is Intimidate.
And he's... lovely.
No, Intimidate, it's combat evasion.
Probably... Yeah, but we always got those people playing black cards at our table, so less so. But it's the fact that you're circumventing costs of recasting Sram, and he's immediately coming back as a 4/4.
Yep.
And a Zombo, because who doesn't love Carl?
And for those who don't know, I think that's the first time we said that.
That was a Rocking Dead reference.
A Rocking Dead?
Because it rocks your world.
For a guy in our play group plays a very disgusting zombie deck, and we just say Carl. But that's it for some of these are the really iconic, very powerful equipments that I have in the deck. I implore our listeners to take a look at the deck list because I always appreciate feedback on decks like this where there are so many equipment that I could run.
Yeah.
That I've had to cull it down over the years. Oh my god. In order to balance. Not flavor, but like, ooh, I want to play that with those just can't be cut. So any feedback on those, because those are really, that's the backbone of the deck.
I simultaneously hate and love that moment in time where you have like a tuned deck and you know that every card in there is in there for a purpose.
Yeah.
But then you want to add something new or you want to interrogate like the prospects of a new card. And so you're now engaging in this, not in this like, is this a good card, but what can this do differently or what can this do better, or how does this improve at the cost of what, and what do I remove in order to. So it's cool that it's like Sram is going into his garage and saying, which sword do I want today and why? It's it's his armory.
He's
right?
He's a tinkerer, man, and I don't know. I'm not, but when it comes to decks, like you need to sort of reevaluate sometimes. The last category that I'm going to run through quickly is called The Guests Have Arrived, which is a further reference to that unexpected party in The Hobbit. Anyways,
I thought that was Breakfast at Tiffany's, but one of these ladies could be Audrey Hepburn. I don't know.
So actually, there are a fair amount. Oh no, there's like 3. So
yeah.
I'm going to run through these pretty quick. We're going to rapid fire them. First one, all these generate value and have synergy. That's all I'm going to say. Leona and Shikari, 1 and a white. Cat Soldier. You may activate equipment abilities anytime you could cast an instant. Flavor text. Her instinct is as sharp as her blade.
That's what Cigar does 8 does. Redundancy is good.
And
also
she's a
2/2. Pretty cheap.
Well, it does it. So the weird thing, it almost does it better in Origin for you than Cigar does 8 because if you have hexproof boots out or shroud, actually Lightning Greaves equips for 0. You're just moving this around while things get targeted, which is hilarious because you just re-equip on the stat.
Yeah.
This is pretty straightforward. It's also a 2/2. It's a body that there are a lot of Leonin that sometimes are run in the second most played white commander.
Kemba.
According to each EDH rec is being Kemba, because they have that a thing of as long as this is equipped, blah 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 blah. Like Kemba generating cats. This is one of the few kitties I run because it that effect is so powerful. The next one is a more recent card, which this is on the chopping block sometimes because it does a lot, but Danitha Capashen, Paragon, 2 generic mana, white and a white. Legendary creature, Human Knight. It's an uncommon from Dominaria. First strike, vigilance, lifelink. Auras and equipment spells you cast cost 1 generic mana to cast. Flavor text.
1 less.
Oh, 1 less to cast.
Yeah.
I will protect the less fortunate. I will love bravely. I will face despair and fight on. As a compassion, I can do no less. She's a 2/2.
Yeah, isn't this like Gerald's daughter? Descendant?
Yeah.
And
she says,
line?
"Fuck you" to Joyra for joining the other light. She's like, "No, I'm good. I got stuff to do here." So this is one that it has a lot of stuff in there. It does do cost reduction, but it's sometimes I feel it's almost she I don't know. She could be a lieutenant in this deck, as in those cards that you could swap out for because of the cost reduction, and she has a lot of keyword soup on her already. But I don't know. I haven't seen her. This is also one of the cards where when you put a card in the deck and you just don't draw it, and you haven't seen it played.
You don't know how it performs yet.
I know it's a good card, but there are times where I look at it and be like, the next one I'm going to talk about, I see out all the time, and it fucking it generates value. So Danitha is just a good. She's also one of those few uncommon legends that we sometimes don't put in or build decks around. That I feel like maybe for fun sometimes I might swap her and Sram out. So
Stone Hero Giant.
Yeah.
Okay, 3 and a double white. I have to play against this card so much, so frick. Vigilance. It's a creature, giant, warrior, has vigilance. 1 and a white, tap. Search your library for an equipment card and put it onto the battlefield. Attach it to a creature you control, then shuffle your library. It's a 4/4 with the flavored text, no matter how strong an unarmed fighter is no more than a fool, because the guy is dual-wielding stone battle axes like a boss.
So this is originally from
Lorwyn. Praise be Lorwyn.
This is one of the ones where you look at it and, okay, so this also represents the other tutor creature on when it has an ETB effect, which is Stoneforge Mystic. It tutors when it enters.
Yeah.
And then you can pay 1 and a white
and put
it into play. So this, though, costs a little bit more. Stoneforge is 1 and a white. This is 3 and 2 white. That you also forget that this thing can attack with vigilance, tap during combat, pull out a sword out of nowhere.
I hate it. Doesn't have to pull out. Can pull out anything because it's like I'm gonna remove it. It's like no.
Yep.
Okay. great. It's like not even like I don't have removal. It's like, okay, great, sure. I'm gonna put a Sword of Cauldre on and now it's a 9/9. It's like, oh, great,
Well,
sure. What else? Like, what else do you want to get for me, Stone Hero Giant?
Well, there's also like Coitus Spike.
Yeah, sure.
Have someone's life.
I don't like. It is a staple of equipment.
It tutors, it swings, it's big boy. He's a big boy. Next one. This is one that similar to Leona and Shikari, but I've singled it out differently because it is very iconic in the deck. I think is Pure Steel Paladin. CMC is 2 white mana for a human knight. Whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. Metalcraft. So activate this as long only if you have 3 or more artifacts. Equipment you control have equip 0 as long as you have Metalcraft. It's also a 2/2.
Which ability do you think is more important here?
I would say Metalcraft.
Really?
Because you often find yourself drawing so many other cards. This is okay. Well, so I would say the 0 and then like it's not saying one or the other. I'm sort of
you're ranking them.
I'm stacking my triggered preferences. Because really, again, if Sram is out, ETB, you're just drawing more cards. You're drawing 2 cards instead of 1. Metalcraft, though, I guess the downside to Metalcraft is that you may not be able to actually get that online.
Right.
But there are so many, like we saw with the Cauldre cycle, there are so many equipment that are good, but now you're paying nothing for them, for their equipment costs. Much better. Now this is also out at the same time that Leona and Shikari is, and you can move them around at instant speed. That don't look away, John. Look at me.
No.
This is just a good card. I think this was expensive for a long time. It was in a modern deck. It still sort of is. It's from New Phyrexia.
Mirrodin, man, we gotta go back.
You can see though, like a lot of these are from Leona and Shikari is also from OG Mirrodin. So there's not much else to say about this creature. It does a lot, and it's actually if this thing was legendary. Well,
if the thing was legendary, it would. Sorry, Sram, but we would see you next time.
Oh no, go back to your fucking garage. The last creature I have here is representative of value / fixing the fact that mono white ramp is hard sometimes, and that's Weathered Wayfarer. I mentioned it earlier, I believe. 1 white mana for a human Nomad cleric. Pay 1 white, tap it, search your library for a land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability if your opponent controls more lands than you. Only if they control more lands than you, and it's a 1/1. This is almost comparable to land tax, but I would argue a little bit better from the fact that you get a land, i.e. Nykthos, i.e. Rogue's Passage, Hald Bandit Lord. This gets out those things where, and this does find a home in a lot of decks outside of mono white because
it's a land card.
Orzhov decks, you want this to go get the things that you turn everything into swamps or Cabal coffers or things like that. Weathered Wayfarer is something that there are some times where I don't activate that ability.
Well, this also gets to Emeria Skyruin, I guess, in this deck.
Emeria Skyruin is something that in mono white you really want to play if you can get to the exorbitant triggered ability. I believe it's 7
planes.
7 planes that you return a card or permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield at the beginning of each turn. So there are games where this comes out turn 1, and because of turn order and lack of ramp, this is just a body that I'm equipping things on, and the activated ability happens incidentally, but it's not something that I will go out of my way to say that this needs to come out every game. It also represents mono white ramp in this deck, which is sort of the Animist and land tax, and that's pretty much I think what I have. There are other
because you draw so many cards that you don't need a lot of ramp because you're going to be hitting your land drops every turn anyway.
I'm not even going to the mana base in this deck, but in this episode, but I run Tron, and there are times where I've gotten Tron online because I draw into them, and I start chanting Tron.
That is another Lord of the Rings reference.
No, I think it's just goblin chanting in general.
Oh, because it's Grond?
Yeah.
Grond, when they're smashing Minas Tirith? If our listeners don't like Lord of the Rings, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can go fall into Mount Doom. So next, I'm going to run through, again, these are more of a summary of what we've talked about. The strengths of this deck really is the equipment is a tool, as you said, not really a tool box, but it's a tool belt that can do different things.
Yeah.
There's a lot of value in these, mechanically a lot of value in these swords and a lot of equipment that can really help you push through when you need to, because that's what the biggest weakness of this deck is that sometimes you can't do it. Sometimes there are other tax effects. There are so many tokens that you need to really buff SRAM up to the point, not necessarily just for power, but for keyword. Because there are other times where you've seen it. I've laid him out. I've laid it out, and it's the question at every combat is, what is he now? It's like, it's just a 14/14 infect, protection from 3 colors, trample, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
You're making your bowl of Cheerios. Or alpha, what are they called? Alphabet,
Alphabet soup?
Not alphabet soup, but there's the oh my god, there's the cereal that are alphabets. The alphabet. Anyways, you're getting your letters, you're getting your A to Z, you're making a full package, and then you're just clobbering them over the head. So
what I think is hilarious is that when you play this and I play Shuyan, I'm trying to do to you what other decks are trying to do to me, which is tax or punish the idea of repeatedly playing artifacts. Because the things that shuts down Shuyan for me is when suddenly my little 1 mana red target creature gains haste instant speed spell suddenly costs 2 mana. It's the same thing with you, when suddenly now your 0 cost artifacts cost 1 and your 2 cost 3 and so forth, because it shuts down the whole ability of drawing repeatedly.
Yeah.
Because when you can't draw, I mean, in any deck it's harmful, but in the deck of mono white where you want to hit your land drop every turn, it's particularly damaging.
Yeah, so the weaknesses of this deck, there are those specific to what I'm trying to do, but, and this is something I want to talk about in another episode, of playing mono white in Commander, there are the inherent weaknesses in the color that is often seen by itself to be very weak.
Yeah.
There's obviously Boros, but we won't talk about Boros and mono red. But you're in the section of the color pie where people are already shitting on you from the get-go.
Yeah.
Like, you're already having a hard time to do things that other decks do well, but also vice versa. You do things, you have, like, unconditional removal that's just very good, or very versatile removal. So I think, to wrap up on that front, this deck is very strong at coming out of the gate fast, drawing about. You want to draw as many cards as you can in one turn, as you said, hitting land drops. Because really, if you're mana starved and you're drawing into a 7-cost artifact, you're done for. Sticking Sram is, I think, one of the strengths and the weakness of the deck, because you need him out to generate as much value as you can, but at the same time, you don't necessarily need him.
Which is why some of the creatures and other permanent effects kind of do what he does, maybe slightly differently, but it gives you a bit of backup when people really hate on our poor little dwarfy boy.
It's redundancies, and we've talked about redundancies before, and those who don't play them should, that you need to have a backup, because as much as I can say this is a Voltron deck and it relies on SRAM,
right,
what he really is to me is he's an enchantment in the command zone that will draw me cards, and if needed, I can give him a sword, pat him on the little head, and say, "Go, buddy. Go swing."
Well, because redundancies are important, because I think you should make a deck building assumption that for every, pillar of your deck, somebody's going to have an answer to it.
I also think of it like...
And it's foolish to think that people are not going to answer it. But so if they answer you 1-to-1, which I think is a good assumption, and then you have a backup, there's a better likelihood that they're also then not going to respond to that, and you might get your effect to stick.
You have to ask yourself as well, and this is not something that applies to every game. Ask yourself, what happens if I can't get my commander out? What happens if I can't hit the colors, or if I can't, if they get countered, or whatever it is? There are some decks that, like my Selvala deck, I lose. That's the answer to the question.
Yeah.
Because this is not a competitive EDH deck, this is a mono white Voltron deck, it can rely without him. I don't need him. Same with Kemba. The other decks that we have seen like this, that you don't need them. So the last thing I wanted to just touch on, I've sort of already brought them out, is the hands that keep, but really it's evident as I've been talking. You need to get Sram out turn 2. That's how you need to see it. You want to have a Cheerio in your hand, cost 1 or 2. Ideally, Skull Clamp is great, or Paradise Mantle, as we talked about. And then maybe have, ideally, a tutor. There's a couple like Open the Armory that I run.
Yeah.
That was like an uncommon from Shadows of Innistrad. Thanks again. And you want to make sure that you can generate value. You get the engine going. Because if you don't, all you have is a shitty 2/2 dwarf.
Hey, his name is Dopey and he helps Snow White.
You know, well, he still gets murked by anything that's larger than a 2/2.
Yeah.
So the last thing that we wanted... so that's it for SRAM.
That's it for SRAM. Let us know what you think. Reach out to Matt. We're going to have the deck list posted.
Yeah, it's already on Tapped Out. I'll just make sure it's linked in this video.
If you guys have any great stories of SRAM or have cards that you think that more people should know about with SRAM, reach out to us so that we can talk about this. We can talk about them at a later point in time.
I'd also be curious to see like people say no, fuck SRAM, you should play this other person, because I've also been struggling with maybe I should open up to another color, but then it's not a SRAM deck anymore. Well,
and there's lots of mono white equipment kind of Voltron-y things. SRAM draws cards though, so
yep.
So that brings us to our new segment.
Well, let's say our
one of our ideas for one of the things that we want to talk about each episode, and
it's kind of like an out the door.
Yeah, this is just it's just shit we looked up this week.
Excuse me, it's hashtag shit we
looked up. So what has happened to us recently? This might be a little obvious to some players, but it's stuff that we had to look up. We have a player in our play group, shout out, who really likes taking other people's turns.
With a specific card.
With 2 specific cards. And I don't even know if he has more, but I hope they don't print more ways of doing it. So it's either a Mindslaver or an Emrakul the Promised End.
Mindslaver, Lockout.
Right.
Which is, you're never playing your deck again for the game, and he's taking everyone's turns. We haven't seen him do it to that extent yet, but...
Pretty close.
And... So, again, as John said, some of these things are, like, you're going to listen to us talk about this, you're like, oh, you fucking idiots, what are you talking about? But...
For us, we had to look it up.
We're like, well, it's more so we were thinking, what if?
Yeah.
As opposed to, what is the actual, like, this is going to affect the game happening right now.
And typically the stuff that we talk about is, like, a broader... has a more like fundamental rules principle. So anyways, Emrakul Promised End. The high idea is that you play an effect that steals somebody else's turn. So it's Matt, John, and Bob. And on my turn, I play Emrakul, and I Emrakul Bob, which means that I'm going to take his next turn. So then what happens when I pass to Matt, and Matt eliminates me from the game? So what happens is that I no longer get to control Bob's turn because mine is a triggered effect that's going to happen. But since I've been removed from the game, all of my effects go away. They're all put into exile. Same with all permanents are put into exile.
Yep, it's the way that I've had this explained the best, especially when it comes to... the way that I've had this explained best is that if you die on the stack, you die. Like, that's it. Like, things are removed.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can respond, but if you are at three life, someone bolts you, and you let that resolve because you have no further responses, you're removed. You're no longer there to resolve your effects. This is something that I think...
So it doesn't matter if you have a permanent on the field or something that cares about when damage is done because you're gone. Like it's like, see ya. It happens.
Yeah, because the effect resolves.
Yeah.
So this is a segment. This is obviously, like, I think to some people this example of one is specific to us because we were sitting there and it got to that point where we were like, maybe we should just kill Bob. Maybe we should just kill this other guy who keeps trying to Mindslaver lock the table.
Yeah.
And I think this section is something that we want to maybe even actually get feedback from the listeners, that if you have those interactions that you're like, huh, I didn't learn about that today. We talked about one in the previous episode about in our lessons learned about Death Touch and Trample.
Yeah.
Which supposed to be butchered explaining. Sorry about that. Because I think we call it shit we looked up, but really it's further of those little mechanics that we learned that, and actually some viewers had some good feedback, change how you assess a situation in the moment, assess a board state, but also change how you build the deck.
Yep. So if you see somebody who's trying to mind slave, the only way to stop turn-taking shenanigans is to take the originator of those mechanics out. Just take them out.
So really what you're saying is if you can't stop the card, kill the player.
Gotta go for it. Otherwise, they're gonna get their effect.
Yeah. So
thanks everybody. And you know what, Matt? There's one card that we didn't talk about that shuts down your deck entirely. Do you know what it's called?
Negate?
No, it's called Cyclonic Rift.
Oh, fuck.